Christian parenting.
Whether it's in our relationships, whether it's at work, little ways that whenever you get that sense of, oh, I don't want them to know, or oh, I better hide that, that's exactly where your shame exists.
Yeah.
And I also want people to understand there's a difference between guilt and shame.
Hey, welcome back, families, to the Call to Love podcast. I'm so excited that you are joining me today. And as always, we dive into the practical, the clinical, and most importantly, the biblical aspects of the adoption and foster care callings. And today we are going to be tackling a big one, guys. This is going to be such an encouraging conversation. We're going to be talking about untangling complex shame, both for ourselves and for our kiddos who have joined our families from hard places. So joining me for this conversation is Dr. Zoe Shaw. She's a licensed psychotherapist, author, speaker, podcast host, relationships coach, and fitness enthusiast. And she's also a mom of 5. So she's a busy lady and she's got a lot to share with us and a lot of wisdom and insight. She's passionate about helping women overcome shame and codependencies so that they can experience health in their relationships with themselves and with others. So Dr. Zoe, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this for sure. We've had this one booked out for a long time, and I'm just like, I can't wait to get you in front of our listeners. So let's begin by allowing our listeners just to get to know you a little bit better. Share a little bit about you, your family, and why you do the work that you do.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I'm a mom of 5. I only have one minor left in the house, my 12-year-old daughter. My son is home for just another week from college. He's going to be going back to his senior year soon. Yeah. So my house will be quiet again.
Yes.
Yeah, I live in Southern California. I love to write, speak. I podcast as well, and I work still as a psychotherapist. I work mostly remotely. But my story to get me to this place where I started to research and really try to grapple with and understand this different kind of shame came from my own shame story. So I am a birth mom, and I got pregnant when I was 15. I grew up in a very evangelical, Christian home, and my dad was a prominent doctor in the community. And when I got pregnant, it was very much like, this is not going to happen. And so my parents sent me away to a pregnancy home with the understanding that I would come back without a baby. And that's what I did. I was forced to place my daughter for adoption, and I came back home to pretend like nothing ever happened. And I know a lot of people think that, well, that doesn't happen anymore. We have open adoptions and those kinds of things. But the reality is that those stories still do happen.
Right.
And sometimes that's how adoptions do happen. And so I think it's more rare now. This was 30 years ago, but they do still happen. So that was my experience. And that's how I really started to develop the shame story. I was both grieving, right, and also feeling so much shame as a result of premarital sex and having a child and having to hide and come back home and pretend. And I kind of developed this false sense of self. And I really compensated with overachievement. I doubled down on athletics. I got a scholarship to UCLA. I did my, bachelor's and got my master's degree and went and got my doctorate degree and started working clinically, still hiding all of that shame and hiding the secret. So it wasn't until I reunited with my daughter when she was 18. She found me through Facebook, and it was a really beautiful, wonderful experience. And yet still, I had a family at home, and I had my extended family, and nobody knew about her. And so it wasn't until my father's death after that point, my parents had reunited with her as well, when everything kind of came to a head. And I made a decision, because she was coming to the funeral, that I needed to share her existence with both my children and my extended family. And so it was kind of a crazy lifetime movie scenario that happened at my father's funeral when I disclosed her to everyone. But that was really the beginning of me working on my shame and trying to understand it. And so I, as a therapist, I have done a lot of research and work on shame in general. And I very much ascribe to Brene Brown's idea about shame, But what I started to find was that there's a different type of shame that is not alleviated by vulnerability and external compassion. And I needed to understand why. Why does some shame easily get alleviated and some, like mine, does not? And
Right.
there's two reasons that I found. One is that we do these things with our shame when our shame is what I call complex. So I've called this complex shame. And when you have complex shame, what happens is you have a shaming experience. And we tend to do things to run from our shame. And in that process, we hurt ourselves. And our shame kind of becomes entangled with our own actions and our identity, whether something was done to us or not. And so when someone tells us, oh, me too, or that wasn't your fault, or whatever the thing is that gives you external compassion, there's a part of you that isn't able to accept it, and there's a part of you that feels like, oh, but you don't know, you
Yeah.
don't know, or you don't really understand, and so you cannot take in that compassion. The other way that complex shame is developed is especially with marginalized communities, when they tend to have experiences that are shaming and they become vulnerable and they talk to someone about it and they're gaslit for their experience. They're told,
Yeah.
oh, maybe you're overreacting, or I'm sure they didn't mean that, or that probably didn't happen, or you just a sense of whatever your experience is, I don't believe it and it's not real. And so
Yeah.
when that happens, the shame just goes deeper and it doesn't get resolved. And so I'm on a mission to help people understand if they have the type of shame that they've tried to become vulnerable and alleviate, or they've noticed that their shame just kind of goes deeper. It's a different kind, and there's a different way of healing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's just incredible just to hear your perspective and all of that. And, honestly, I am confident that we would be hard pressed to find a person that says that they do not struggle with something in their past that is causing
Right.
guilt and shame in their lives. And so today's really a unique opportunity for conversation and for you to speak to us first as women
Mm-hmm.
and then as moms who are
Yeah.
carrying this incredible burden on behalf of children that we have been called to love through adoption and foster care. And I'm sure that there are some birth moms here as well that are listening. And so I think it probably would be a great place to start if you would agree with me, Dr. Zoe. Let's take our mama hats off for a minute. And let's
Yes.
just talk to us as women and allow us to pause and remove that mama hat and just talk about the all too common struggle that we share collectively with complex shame and guilt. Talk about just how that is a shared experience for so many, even though we all kind of feel alone in our shame.
Yeah, it is. And what I tell women often, especially when people think, oh, I don't know if that's what I'm dealing with, or, I'm having these relationship issues, or whatever's going on, the way that you can identify shame is anywhere in your life that you're hiding, because shame makes us hide. And so if you're
Mm.
hiding sometimes from ourselves, right, which we do through, sometimes addictions, or different behavior that we just kind of run from ourselves, or if we're hiding from other people, whether it's in our relationships, whether it's at work, little ways that whenever you get that sense of, oh, I don't want them to know, or oh, I better hide that, that's exactly where your shame exists.
Yeah.
And I also want people to understand there's a difference between guilt and shame. So, guilt, in my professional opinion, is a healthy, can be, I should say, in the best circumstances, guilt can be a healthy emotion. Now, of course, we have sometimes mom guilt that's not always valid. So we do
Right.
have to figure out, is the guilt valid or is it not valid?
Yeah.
But guilt generally is a healthy experience. And we can know it's healthy when we know guilt tells us we've done something wrong to break our own moral code. And
Mm.
if we really feel we've done something wrong to break our moral code, there's something we can do about it. We can go back and repair. We can apologize. We can make a decision. I won't do that anymore. And that's also how you can tell the difference between healthy guilt and non-healthy guilt. Because sometimes non-healthy guilt is just like this sense of, oh, I'm not good enough. And it kind of goes a little bit towards shame.
Yeah.
But healthy guilt is usually about a behavior that we do that has broken our moral code. And that's good because it keeps us aligned, right? It keeps us able to function healthily in society.
Yeah.
I believe that God created guilt. Shame is a whole nother thing, because guilt can bring us back to God. Guilt can bring us to a place of repentance, right?
Right.
Shame is completely different. And if you look back in Genesis, you can see exactly when shame was created. It was created by the devil,
Right.
right? As an attempt to distance humans from God. That's the
Yeah,
only purpose of shame, is to distance us,
that's right.
is humans from humans or humans from God. And, if you think back about what happened, all of a sudden after, the fall, Adam and Eve felt shame, and God was like, what's wrong? Like, I made you guys like this. Why are you feeling shame? Why are you covering yourself? Um, and I think that's the best indication for us to understand, because in the Christian community, a lot of people, well, a lot of our Christian culture actually value shame. We shame people. That is
Mm,
something that we do to try to keep people aligned. But what we've come to understand is that shame seems to work on a sociological basis. It seems to work in the church, but it doesn't. What
yeah.
shame does is it just causes people to go underground with their behavior. Guilt creates change. Shame, when you have a sense of shame, you have this sense of, I am wrong. I am not good. And it's not, I did something wrong. And if you yourself are not good, unworthy, there's nothing for you to do but to hide, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I want people to understand. When you see shame in your life, that's something we need to work on overcoming. That's a lie from the devil. When you see guilt in your life, okay, that's a behavior you might need to change.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that is so good. Thank you for differentiating between the two because I think we do lump them together a lot of times. So to hear that explained in that way, I think, another biblical word you could use in correlation with guilt would be conviction. And
Yes.
so, yeah, and causing us to recognize and to change behavior because we don't want to be hurtful ultimately to God our Father. So that is so, so good. I think as I'm listening to you, I mean, like, that takes a lot of work. It
Yeah.
takes a lot of ourselves
Mhm.
to recognize to deal with the emotions that come from the shame that we're carrying when it ultimately is attacking our very being. There's a
Yes.
lot that goes into that, and we're tired women. I mean, we are exhausted, and there's so many reasons why I think we don't even realize half the time that we stay buried in
Mhm.
that because
Mhm.
in our minds it's quote unquote easier for us to
Yes.
do that, and we've got so many other things to do, and we're prioritizing everybody else in our lives and in our homes and in our families. We're raising babies, we're being wives, we're, you know in our careers, whatever that might look like. So there's a lot to that. It would be really easy in one sense just to put it away. But why is it important, Dr. Zoe, for us to recognize our shame story and how it shapes our self worth and the fact that it is worth it to do the work, even when it's hard and uncomfortable?
Yes. Number one, you hit the nail on the head. It is hard work, and it's way easier in the present, any moment, to just push it away, to run from it, because it's one of those, it's almost invisible. And so it's easy to push it away, which is why the work that I call it untangling. We're untangling our shame from our identity. And that's what I explain the process of untangling in my book. But the reason why is because, just like I said, shame causes us to hide, right? And this happens with our children as well. And I would venture to say that most children who are adopted probably have some level of complex shame, because there are so many um, aspects to developing an identity in the process of being raised as an adoptee. And
Right.
so I would venture to say most do. And the reality is that there are plenty of parents who have complex shame, and then we project our shame often onto our children, onto our
Yeah.
relationship. And not everybody has complex shame, but everybody has shame. So it's important to understand that whether it's complex or what I call simple shame, everybody has it. So the answer, because shame causes us to hide, we hide in our relationships, we hide in our work, we hide in all aspects of our life when we have shame, and it sabotages every single one of those. And the most important is in relationships, in my opinion. Obviously, if you're, trying to advance in your career, that's important too. But when we have shame and we hide in relationships, we don't show up as who we are.
Yeah.
And so we are presenting a false sense, right? A facade. And our children do this in our families, and we sometimes do this in our relationships. And the problem is that when people genuinely love us, there is a sense of us that feels unloved, because we know in the back of our head, but they don't really know me, because I
Yeah.
haven't really shown all of myself to them. And so when you feel unloved, then you're responding to the people in your relationship as if they don't love you, when they may genuinely love you. And shame keeps us from connecting. It keeps us from feeling love. It keeps us from expressing love. And that's why it's so important for us to work actively to untangle shame so that we can show up as God made us, right? Shame
Yeah.
free so that we can have healthy relationships.
I love that. And that's the key right there. And so much of what we talk about on the show is the how important it is to be connected to our kids. And
Yeah.
so to be genuinely yourself and strong in a place of who you are and who God made you to be, I think it's easier to be vulnerable because, to be called to love a child that you did not give birth to, that's a very vulnerable thing. You're offering your heart to somebody that may or may not accept it fully.
Mm,
And
yes.
you're coming with your own baggage, if you will,
Right.
your own life experiences, your own past mistakes and things that you carry. And then you're welcoming this child who you're choosing to love. You're embracing with everything that you are. And they're bringing their baggage and their hurt. And that
Yeah.
can be really complicated in of itself. And so I think that's why I'm so grateful for this conversation to call out and to recognize the different aspects of this dynamic because it's hard, but ultimately the goal is love and relationships and trust and safety. So I love that you're talking about this. And in the midst of all of this, and I love that you called this out, it's the enemy who wants to interfere. He
Yep.
wants to have us trapped. He doesn't want healthy relationships. He doesn't want families restored. He wants
Mhm.
to fight it at every turn. So, what does he use every single time? Lies. And so you
Yes.
talk about this in your book and just the narratives that we form and how
Mhm.
that impacts us. And so I want to take that part on. I want to call it out. So many of our lies that we believe, they become this narrative and it influences the way that we interact and the way that we behave. So what steps can we take to break free from these false narratives that are hindering our relationships?
That's so good. So good and so true. And I've seen this both in my own parenting. I brought a lot of shame to my parenting. I've seen
Mm,
this in my daughter, my biological daughter who I placed for adoption. I have seen this in her, this sense of abandonment, right? And how that has impacted our relationship, this kind of reticence to put herself out there because of fear of additional rejection.
yeah.
Um, and so the first thing we have to understand is we have to understand the lies that we're telling ourselves. When we have a shaming experience, there are words that are either put upon us, toxic messages is what I call them, those toxic shame messages, or we interpret them, right? So sometimes someone can verbally put something on us, but the reality is that the things that we tend to hold on the most dearly, the rules that we understand in families, are often unspoken. And so we can get a sense of, I'm not loved, I'm not good enough, I'm fat, ugly, stupid, all of those things without ever someone actually saying those words to us,
Yeah.
because we, the reality is that we communicate as humans way more through nonverbal, non-verbally than we do verbally.
It's a great point.
And so children can kind of receive those messages even when parents don't say them. And so what we have to do is we have to go back and start to understand, what are my shame messages? What are those words, those lies that I brought with me? Because this is what happens is when we leave relationships, especially relationships that we think are unhealthy, maybe toxic relationships or relationships where we've received these messages, we think that we've left them, right? But what we often do is we just pack up all the words that the people have said to us and we bring them with us and we repeat them to ourselves. And
Yeah.
so when you're feeling especially angry, sad, frustrated, um, negative feelings, start to pay attention to, what am I saying to myself? And I ask my clients to create logs, like, let's journal, let's log this for a week and hear the words that you're saying to yourself, because often you don't pay attention to it. And those
Yeah.
are often shaming words. And so we start with that. And then what we have to do is we have to start to pay attention to, what are the things that I blame myself for. So let's talk about someone who maybe is the victim of something. And if you have complex shame, then what happens is you've been victimized. And to a certain extent, you blame yourself, because you might feel, I could have done something in the split second. I could have made this decision or that decision. And so a lot of therapists will say, oh, it's not your fault, and try to help you understand why it's not your fault. And that doesn't work where someone who has complex shame, because remember, I said they're going to be like, oh, but you don't understand.
Right.
What I say is, let's work with that. Let's work with what your brain does. And let's start to dissect what you feel like was your fault. Let's go ahead and open up the blame and acknowledge it, which can feel like victim blaming, and people don't want to do that. But I'm saying let's do that. So let's lay out all the things that you feel were your fault, that you are to blame. And now let's one by one start working on forgiving yourself for them.
Yeah.
And the thing that the quote regarding forgiveness that I love the most, it was by Jopalinsky, and the quote is that forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. And I love
Mm.
that quote because it's not attached to anybody. It's not attached to you. It's not attached to a person, a perpetrator. It's just giving up all hope that the past could have been different.
Mm.
And so when you can work on all the things that you blame yourself for, and you can give up all hope of a better past with the understanding that all behavior makes sense in its context, which means whatever you did, it actually makes perfect sense if you understand yourself from birth, your temperament, your personality, all the things that happened to you, and why you made the decision at that point. If we can give up all hope of a better past, we can begin to forgive ourselves. And then we can start talking about it, becoming vulnerable, receiving external compassion, and it helps. But first, we have to untangle it.
That is so fantastic. I love that quote. How profound and
Mm,
how freeing that is. I
right.
absolutely love that. And so, the natural good consequence of walking through that process and experiencing that is repair work, right?
Yes.
In your relationships. And so, talk to us for a moment, and the host of the show, for those moments where you're more or less inflicting your own shame on the people that you love the most. You're desperately wanting to repair. Where do we even begin that repair work after we've walked through these steps that you've given us?
That's so good. That's so good. Well, if we're talking about projecting our shame, then what we have to do, especially with our kiddos, especially with our spouses, especially with our friendships, is be willing to go back and have those conversations, be willing to recognize what we're doing to project the shame. When we look at embarrassment regarding things that our children might do, sometimes our shame is attached to that, and we're trying to change them. We're trying to mold them into this view of how we think they should be so that we feel worthy and we feel better.
Yeah.
And so when you start to recognize, and sometimes it's just asking yourself, what is my motivation for correcting my child in this way? What is my motivation for giving my child this information? Is this about me? Do I feel any sense of I need to hide this part of me, or I don't want them to show or be a certain way because of me? Or is this really about them and what I
Yeah.
can see is the best for them?
Yeah.
Um, and when you start to notice the things, and myself included, like I said, I parented from shame for from a place of shame for many, many years. When we start to notice that, then we need to go back to our children, and we can talk to our children about shame. We can talk to them about how to start identifying their own shame,
Yeah.
and how and be a space that they can begin to talk about it with us, because one of the biggest aspects of working through our shame is the maintenance phase, and the maintenance phase is regularly identifying when it's there, saying, oh yes, I know what that feeling is. That's shame. I know where that came from. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to kind of let it pass by, and I'm going to go ahead and do the thing that I'm fearful of doing because I know that it's healthy for me, right? And we
Yes.
can also walk that road with our children. Our children don't need us to be perfect, but our children do need us to be real. And
Yeah.
that's harder. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's harder to be real, right,
Yes.
than it is to pretend to be perfect.
Yes. Oh, that's so good, Dr. Zoe. I love that. And again, just such an encouragement for us, as I think we do take on that added pressure of welcoming kids that we know have experienced trauma. We're like, we got to be on our A game at all times. We cannot fail. We cannot have the wrong answers, the wrong methods, the wrong interactions, or we're going to fail and our child will then, fail. And so we carry that, and we don't even realize we're carrying it half the time. And so I want to ask you this question. It's kind of a tough question, because one of the things that you talk about specifically is healthy emotional and relational boundaries.
Mhm,
And so there is an extra level of mental and emotional investment to parent kids who have experienced trauma.
mhm.
And so how can we set healthy emotional and relational boundaries in a way that still allows us to love our children well and honor the calling that we've said yes to?
Ooh,
Loaded
it's a great,
question, I know.
yeah, no, it's a great question. And the first thing that comes up for me, because I talk a lot about codependency, is that we need to get to a place where we're okay with our children having their own feelings that are separate from ours.
Yeah.
And when we can have conversations with them and not join in their feelings, because a lot of times we do this in parenting and our relationships, is there's this sense of we all have to feel the same thing, right? And I need to kind of control you so that you feel a certain way so that I feel better, or so that I feel a certain way, instead
Yeah.
of recognizing that you're different people. And it's okay for your child to feel something completely different than you do. It's okay for your child to be hurting even in a moment and you not be hurting. It can
Yeah.
actually help you be there more for them than if you join with them in
Yeah.
that, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so part of it is allowing our children to hurt openly, to express their feelings. Because sometimes as parents, we don't want them to hurt, right?
Yeah.
Because we want to feel like, okay, we're taking care of them in every single way so they won't experience those things. But the reality is that your children will be hurt. And
Yeah.
when I think about the concept of a good parent is kind of like a functioning net, like a fishing net.
Yeah.
If a net had no holes in it, it would not be functional, right? And if
That's
a
good.
net has a gaping hole, it is also not functional. And so, what we are trying to create in our children is not humans with no holes. And we're definitely not want to avoid those gaping holes. But if we try to avoid our children experiencing pain, then two things happen. They're going to, but they're not going to feel comfortable coming to us about it, because
Right.
sometimes our children feeling good is a way that we feel better,
Great
right?
point.
And
Yeah.
so we've got to be able to recognize that our journey in parenting is to walk alongside our children as they experience all the things,
Yeah.
teach them resilience, be able to validate their experiences, even if they are not our own experiences.
Yeah.
And that helps to alleviate shame as well. And that helps to create a healthy emotional relationship between you and a child when you're validating all of their experiences, recognizing that it's okay, they're not the same as yours, and you're walking alongside them.
That's so fantastic. What an encouraging response to all of that. And that really gives us something to ponder as we apply that to our own individual families. I want to ask this. I was thinking as you were explaining that, the question came up in my head. How do we walk that fine line
Mm,
of, well, I love that idea, and we talk about that a lot on the show, of just walking alongside and
right,
having this mindset of parenting as stewardship rather than ownership, right?
yeah.
And so, but with that, understanding that our kids are going to carry their own wounds, their own hurts, their own shame, their own trauma, how do we walk that fine line of walking with them but not exacerbating the trauma, I guess is the word I'm using, to want to pull it out? Maybe we want to address it and we want to fix it, but they're not ready yet. And so
Mm.
how do we walk that fine line of honoring when they're ready to deal with their own part of that story, and still wanting to steward them well and be that resource for them when it is time? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
It does. It does. And sometimes, our own anxiety, our children pick up on. And
Oh,
although
for
we may be
sure.
verbally saying, like, tell me, and I want you to process this and talk about it. If they're
Yeah.
feeling the sense of our own anxiety,
Yeah.
they'll, like I said, we speak to each other non-verbally way more than we do verbally.
Yeah.
Um, and so something that I do with my daughter that I have found to be really helpful, and of course you can only do this with children who are at the age that they can write. But once she started to be able to write, I kept a journal. And what I did with that journal is I'd write some things in it and I'd put it in her bed and she could read it. And whenever, sometimes it would be that same day, sometimes it'll be a month later, she'll write back or she'll write some things that maybe it's hard for her to say to my face to face, but she can write and then she'll put it on my bed. And that's a way that she can have some space to process and talk about things that may feel really uncomfortable for her to do face to face.
Yeah.
But really, it's working on your own grounding so that you are approaching your children with a sense of calm
Mm,
regarding whatever's going on with them. Because if they feel a sense of calm, they'll feel safer to be able to come to you. If
that's
you're
right.
pressing them, then they're going to feel that agitation and that anxiety. And so it really is a matter of, especially with little ones, identifying what you imagine they may be feeling, because sometimes they can't come up with words. And
Right.
so you can say things like, I imagine you might be feeling this. You're not telling them they are, but you're
Right.
imagining for them. Um, and you're not saying that they have to agree to it. You're just giving them language,
That's
right, for
good.
their experience.
Yeah.
And then you can let them sit with it and you can tell them, you can talk to me about it or you can write to me about it. I'm going to write a couple of things here and I'm going to give it to you to kind of process. And if you feel like writing back or talking to me, you're open to do that. That's a little tool that can be helpful.
I got to tell you, as you shared that, I started tearing up because I've been
Mm.
doing that with my kids for a long time.
Oh, I love that.
And it just kind of naturally came to be. And I honestly don't even know who started it. It was with my firstborn son is we started it. My middle doesn't do it quite as much, just his personality is different.
Mm-hmm.
But my oldest and my youngest, my adopted daughter, we do this. And it really is incredible
Mm-hmm.
the communication that comes as a result of that. So I love that you share that tool. I'm like, yay, I'm doing something right as a mom. But honestly, I think it's just the goodness of God that came
Mm-hmm.
to be. So, but I love that suggestion. Y'all, it's actually quite fun.
Yeah.
There is a sweetness to walking into your room and seeing that little notebook that's just special between the two of you,
Yeah.
and it's waiting for you with some kind of a message. And I'm talking me as the mom, like I'm not even talking like for my kid. And so, and I've been able to go back and look. My oldest just graduated; he just started his freshman year of college, and
Mm.
to go back and look at those first notes where he couldn't spell the words properly because he was still little, but yet he was telling me all the things, and then how they've grown over the years, and just the tone and the messages and the words that he's used and all of that. I mean, gosh, that's so precious. So what a practical but amazing way to connect with our kids and to be that safe place as we are each walking through our own healing journeys with the hard things that we experience in our
Yep.
past. Dr. Zoe, I love this conversation. I just absolutely love the work that you're doing, and I am so, so grateful. I want to make sure that our listeners can connect with you further. The book is out this week, so tell them where they can find your latest book and how they can connect with you further.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. My book is called Stronger in the Difficult Places. The tagline is Heal Your Relationship with Yourself by Untangling Complex Shame. And in it, I walk the 9 steps or 8 steps of overcoming complex shame. And I also share my story, my journey, through developing complex shame all the way to the healing process. So it's not a memoir, but it definitely has some memoir components in it, and it's also completely a self-help book to help any person, especially women, overcome shame in their life.
Fantastic. Okay,
You
listeners,
can
I'm going
find
to
it
have
anywhere. You can find it any place that books are sold. My website is Dr. Zoe Shaw, DrZoeShaw.com. And I'm also on Instagram under the same handle.
Fantastic. Okay, listeners, I will have that in today's show notes. And I would encourage you, for those who are foster and adoptive moms, to lean into this message, because I think sometimes we miss that part of the triad and we forget our bio moms and the stories that they are continuing to live with. And for so many, we need to be prayerful over who are still stuck. Let me start that over, who are still stuck in that complex shame, who have not had the tools and had somebody like Dr. Zoe being able to speak to them and to say, you can overcome this, and here's how. So another just point of encouragement as we just continue to grow our knowledge and our wisdom and our experience and our hearts for everybody involved in that adoption triad. So I'm a fan. I'm so grateful that you have been on a show, and thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure as well.
Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.